Okay, everyone. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to start coloring a comic book cover. Now, what I have open here is the page that I inked in a previous demonstration. Uh, I've just decided that actually this would make a really good cover rather than just a splash page. So this is going to be the cover for issue 2 of Commodore Dinosaur. You'll notice that I switched up the logo from a different version. That's because the first issue of Commodore Dinosaur is pretty much in the can, okay, as they say. It's done, okay. As a matter of fact, here, let's take a look. This is the cover of the first issue. Then we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 24 pages. Actually, it's three 8-page chapters, making 24 pages, all about the origin of Commodore Dinosaur. You know, has a lot to do with kind of the Lost City stuff, you know, set the turn of the century, all that kind of business. I know in a previous thing where I was designing cover, I'd reconsidered his origin story for a bit, but like I said, this one's already done. And so I decided to just go ahead with this anyway. So that's what I'm doing. The idea was maybe having just come from an egg rather than having be a transformed human. But you know, I liked the idea of the transformed human, and it, like I said, it was already done. This story, with some minor changes, was actually my MFA thesis. Okay, so we've got the end of the story here where Theodore Roosevelt shows up. He's the Assistant Secretary of the Navy and Commodore Dinosaur's boss, and we see a little task force that's going to be introduced later on. And then here's our back cover right here. Okay, so this was actually a lot of fun to set up. I photoshopped some artwork, some of my own artwork into an old 1890s New York World newspaper and changed up the headlines and all of that. So that's the first issue. So yeah, so I decided, yeah, I'm gonna switch that up and go ahead and stick with the 1890s thing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make this in color. Probably gonna take a couple of demos to get through all of that, and then get it to like this point here. This is another IP that I have. This is one that you saw me set up some character design stuff with. The character of Arnza actually owns several IPs or intellectual properties that I'm working on at the moment. And this is a completed cover. This is the first issue of the Arnza book. You saw the first issue of the Commodore Dinosaur book, and now I'm working on the second issue of Commodore Dinosaur. This is all while teaching, 8 classes at mid. But you can see here, I've got my ink trap lines that were all done. And then I've got my color layer under that. And then I got my logo and all that sort of thing. Okay. So yeah, I'm sorry if it seems disorienting because I'm going from one IP or one concept to another over the course of this class. But I have several: Commodore Dinosaur, Arnza, and there's another couple that I'm playing around with. Now, going back to this. Yeah, I've got my same logo in there as I have in the first issue. That's the black and white version, and I'm actually not going to probably use that. So I'm going to make that go away right now because I don't want it. I don't want to have a big gap in the color when I go to put it on the template for the cover. The template, if you can see this, for the cover is smaller than the actual size of the artwork. The artwork here is 11 by 17. This is just over 6.5 inches by 10, and that's a Comixology size. That's really close to standard print issue size, but just a little bit narrower. And this stuff is going to be published through Comixology, so I had to adjust for that. Okay, now first off, too, this whole thing is grayscale, and we can't have it be grayscale. It needs to be color. Okay, so we need to change that. So let's go up to Image, Mode, and let's go to RGB color because that's the kind of color we need for Comixology. If it were to be for print, it would be CMYK. I'm going to say don't flatten, okay, because I want all these logos, excuse me, all these layers separate. Got my logo layer, got my blacks layer, I got my inks layer. Notice that the blacks layer is separate. That's because after painting, the blacks are going to be reduced in opacity and make those kind of a gray tone over top of the color. Okay, got my inks layer, of course, here, and well, you don't need to put the signature, but you always want to have a signature on there. One thing you'll also probably notice too is that there are some things that are done in white, like here, where the propellers are spinning around. That's actually inked in white. So when I have a color backdrop put in, those will actually show up. You can't see them so well against the white of the background, but they are there. So you got to think ahead when it comes to your digital inking and digital coloring. Okay, so that was the first thing we had to do in order to make this into a color cover. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to put in the background color. I find this usually works best. So we need to figure out what our color is going to be. Okay, now we've got our background here. We've got our. Now I'm not going to use that background color, that background for color because that's locked. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start making newer layers. So I'm going to click the new layer thing here. I'm going to move this up in between the pencils and the logo. The logo is the thing on the bottom that you will see. And I'm going to call this not background, but backdrop. That's going to be the backdrop color. Actually, we just call it that, backdrop color. Okay. Now, that way I can drop in this color and have it be whatever I want. Now, as far as like what color I want it to be, this right here is an unsplash photo of a city at night. Okay, so I want kind of the glow of a city, but at night, you know, sort of a dust thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my my eyedropper and grab this this shade of purple, and then switch this around and grab maybe not quite all the way up the top, but right about there, that deep blue. Now I still have those colors loaded here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on my gradient tool, and let's see what gradient we have here. We're going to, right now it's set on blues. What I really want to do is I want to have it be the colors that we have. So I'm going to click here first, my color, click on that, and then I've already got this one. The color that's in the foreground was what was already loaded. So there, my gradients are set right there. All right, and now let's see if I can remember which way it's going to go. If it's going to go this way or the other way. There we go. Okay, cool. All right, so we've got our sort of evening color put in. Now, eventually, I might go back in and put in a little bit of clouds or something like that. And for that, I usually use a brush, a Photoshop brush. Now let's go back here. Okay, there's a little bit of stuff we got to clean up, a little bit. So you can see that there's a little bit of white here and there. Actually, I'll pause that while I get rid of these little things. Okay, sorry about that little halt there. I had redrawn some of this while experimenting with a different program, and decided to bring some of that in. So some of that came in with it, some of this white that I didn't really need. Anyway, so we're back to this. Now, whoops, deselect that. Now, as we did when we were designing our characters, we're going to be using the pencil tool to do color flats. Okay, so so we've got our backdrop color layer here. So we're going to be doing color flats on top of that, and then adding more shading and highlights once those are done. Okay, this is going to be a night scene, and like I said, it's going to be a different size. It's going to look pretty cool, I think, by the time we're done. So let's go ahead and start adding our color flats. We'll add another layer here. Okay, we're going to move this underneath the ink layer. Call this color flats. Flats. And then we'll grab our pencil tool and go at it. Now, first though, we need to figure out what our colors are going to be. Now, Commodore Dinosaur is sort of a base green. I don't want to get too light with it. This color right here, as a matter of fact, pure yellow green, that's not bad. That's basically that's pretty close to the color of the maquette that I have. But I might go a little bit darker than that. I don't know that I want it pure green, so I might go with this and just adjust the color a little bit. So let's make that just a touch darker, but not quite as dark as pure green. Okay. Now what you can do too is, if you want to, you can start adding your own colors and making your own color palette. As a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and do that. We'll not let me want to do it. Oh, that's because I think I'm under a certain. Oh, the new version. Okay, let's add a new swatch. Okay, there it is. And we're going to call this Commodore base. Let's call it flesh based. Okay, it's always a good idea if you're going to have a color you're going to be using over and over and over again to create a a library of these things. Now, when doing character design stuff, um, we create a bunch of samples right then. Now, when I created Commodore Dinosaur several years ago, I didn't do that. I did some comic sheets, but I never really took the time to do that. So there's my basic flesh color. Now I'm going to go ahead and start flatting this in using the pencil tool. I'm going to use, let's see, hard round pressure size. I don't need that. The pencil tool, we'll go with that there. All right. Like I said, the pencil tool isn't you don't have the pressure thing that you do with like you do with the um, brush tool. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make sure that's not on. Right now, my libraries thing just popped up. Was just keep me from doing what I want to do. Okay, there we go. I'm going to make this just a bit bigger though. About 10. Okay, there. All right, so now I can start going in, and because my layer is underneath my ink layer, I can just go in there. And remember, when you're doing flats, you're going to be using the bucket tool to drop in your color after you're done. So all I got to do is just do an outline. And you notice that I got a little slop here and there. That's okay. If you go a little bit outside the lines, not a problem. You can go back in with your eraser tool, clean those edges up. Not a big deal at all. Now, one thing I'm also going to do here, I'm going around the mouth because that's not going to be green. It wraps around the teeth. That's an important thing that people kind of forget about when they're doing comics is that the basic biological stuff that you learn when doing the human figure and drawing one. It still applies here. It does. The way you've got lips wrapping around teeth and eyelids and all that kind of thing. There we go. Clean that up a little bit. So we got our trap lines all there. Let's switch this back to our paint bucket tool. Drop that in. Oh, look at that. My pencil tool had some feathering going on. Oh, it's because of the kind of brush that I used, I think. Oh, it switched up on me. Oh, I was trying to use this crispy anchor thing, and I think it switched back to my paintbrush. I didn't notice. Well, that happens. That's not a big deal. Let's go ahead and that's a little big. That's okay. We can just yeah. I got this new set of brushes that I guess are only for the paintbrush tool. I thought I could use them for the I thought I could use them for the pencil tool, but I guess not. Well, there you go. Yeah, that was a brush from the True Grit Texture Supply company. They have a lot of great stuff. Now, this green may look really bright against the purple right now, but that's okay. We're going to be shading this down using gradients and other stuff. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and pause this while I work ahead on doing the rest of the color flats, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Okay, probably about an hour or so has passed since I signed off. As you can see here, I've got figures taken care of with the base colors. Also, this foreground building. Now you'll notice that I have actually turned off the layer of black. Okay, and so I could actually see what I was doing. If I turn it back on, you can see that they're covered. Those parts are covered back up again. What we're going to eventually do, though, is um, have a tone something like that in there. Okay, and that's why you keep black layers separate from your there's 50% right there. That's why you keep black layers separate from your inks where you have large areas of black fill, because if it's going to be in color, you might have areas where you don't want that full blown solid black in there. Okay, now there's a difference though. I might go back in a little bit with this character here. What he's wearing is, dark clothing, which, well, technically it probably would be black, but it's not going to actually be black in the comic itself. When you see black as a color on a person, you read it as black. A lot of times it's a lot of shades of gray. So they'll be putting in highlights and a little more shading in there to give it a little more nuance. Okay, now back to this. I'm going to turn the blacks back off again. As far as the foreground is concerned, all that's really left with the foreground is just putting in some of this mortar color. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in my color flats layer, grab my pencil, and for this, I think I want a slightly darker version of this gray here. So I already have that loaded up, so I'm going to grab that and let's make that a little bit darker, about like that. Now, all I really need to do in order to make this work is just pop in a little bit of color on places where there are openings. Okay, so, whoops. Now, the only problem that you may have is when you have colors that are really close in value. Right now, this gray is a really close value to this color of purple, so it's a little hard to see what I've got going on there. But if I just pop in a little bit at the edges here, I should be able to just use my, oh, I had a little bit of an opening there. Should be able to use the paint bucket tool to fill in the bulk of it. Oh, there it is right there. Okay. So let's fill that in. You know, you could also too, could just kind of go through here and do this number. That's a little more tedious though, I think. So sometimes it's a better idea just to plug up where you know any gaps are and do it that way. Yeah, it's still there. All right. But you get the idea. So there's some little gap in there between my red and my gray. There. That took care of it. And see, even though there's a line here at the top, that's on a separate layer than the ink, so that's not going to trap it. You got to remember that you have things on different layers. See, undo that. So when you have things on different layers like that, you have to remember what's where, what's on what layer, so things don't go sideways. So you can see there's a little difference there between the purple and the gray. Yeah, probably just as easy to just go in with your pencil tool and just fill in these little lines like that. And if you run off a little bit, it's an easy fix. Just switch over to your other color. Like in this case, a lot of times what I'll do is I would have both kind of either as foreground color or background color, and just switch out easily between the two. Actually, that should be able to just, yeah, pop it in like that. Make sure that's in there. Now, what happens too is these guidelines sometimes will kind of make things a little bit difficult. Because what happens with Photoshop is you've got these snap to colors that want to just pop it in. Let's try this and see if, no, see, miss something. Oh yeah, I can see that gap right there and a little gap right there. Good thing there's undo. Actually, if you zoom in a little closer, sometimes you can see where the problem might be. Oops, wrong gray. Yeah, anywhere there might be a gap could be where it's leaking out. So sometimes it's just easier just to go in and just draw it. Oh, I missed a little bit of brick there too. Now you notice too, in this case, I'm doing this brick building in the foreground, which the corners of I have is more of a concrete color. Okay, so you want to make sure that you do your research and have some believable colors going on. Okay, so yeah, so in this case, let's zoom out again. The top of the building is gray block. The rest of it is brick, and for the rest of these buildings in the background too, I'll have to go back in and sort of do a little bit of research on what color the buildings would be, back in the 1800s. This is before the days of steel and glass, before the days of the skyscraper. So these buildings are all made of wood, brick, and things like that. Okay, so in order to make your thing work, you really gotta do a little bit of research and find out what's what. Even like with this plane up here, which you didn't see me coloring in, I had to do enough research to find out that okay, there are mechanical parts that are made of metal, and then there's a wooden frame. So some of it's going to be gray, some of it's going to be brown. And I'm going to go back in and add some highlights to this brown on like the bottom side where light's going to be hitting it. Same's true with the metallic bits. I'm going to add little parts there. There'll be a lot of shading going on the figures, because when we get to actually adding all the stuff that makes this pop, there's going to be a light side and a shadow side to everything. Now, right now, the way I plan to do this is to have the light coming from below. Okay, so there's going to be it'd be like light from street lights and that sort of things, which would be below these guys. They're on top of a building. All right, so but that'll be next time. All right, we're about at 25 minutes right now, so I think that's probably about good. Yeah, we'll pick this up next time, where I think off camera I'll finish these buildings up, putting in the flats for those. And then the next time we'll talk about adding, highlights and shadows and really making it pop. All right, talk to you guys later.